You're not equipped to handle your own finances anymore. My hands were shaking as I stared at those Sunshine Manor brochures spread across my kitchen table like funeral programs. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out right there next to my diabetes medication and the eviction notice I couldn't afford to pay. The number $4,200 a month kept swimming in front of my eyes, more money than I'd ever had in my entire life. They had no idea I was about to become their worst nightmare. I'm Maxine Rodriguez, but everyone calls me Max. I'm 68 years old, and I'm here in my beautiful executive office at Segundo Chance Enterprises in Dayton, Ohio. But 3 years ago, I was a broken-down diabetic cleaning lady facing homelessness while my 3 children plotted to warehouse me in a nursing home. What they didn't tell me, what they'd been hiding since 2018, was that I was sitting on a $47 million fortune in Apple stock that my late husband Miguel had bought with our tax refund money 40 years ago. When I discovered their betrayal and that hidden wealth, I decided to teach them exactly what happens when you throw away the wrong grandmother. Now, if you're listening to this while you're having your morning coffee or maybe taking a break from your own family drama, I want you to hit that like button right now, because each like is so important to help my voice reach other women who need to hear this story. And subscribe to Grandma's Legacy, because no woman should ever be discarded by her own children like yesterday's garbage. Let me paint you a picture of December 15th, 2020. I was sitting at my little Formica table in my rental house on Riverside Drive, the same table where I'd served thousands of meals to my kids, helped with homework, celebrated birthdays when we could afford cake mix. The diabetes had gotten so bad that Datatech Solutions finally forced me into retirement after 42 years of mopping their floors for $11.75 an hour. My blood sugar was out of control, my feet were so numb I could barely feel them, and my Social Security check of $200 a month wouldn't even cover the insulin I needed, let alone rent. That's when my oldest, Trent, he's 46 now, works as a middle manager at Pinnacle Financial Group downtown, called with his compassionate solution. Mom, Lacey, and Gary and I have been talking. We think it's time we looked into Sunshine Manor. It's a beautiful facility, and they specialize in diabetic care. Beautiful facility. $4,200 a month for a shared room with a woman who screamed at night and Jell-O 3 times a day. Trent, honey, I can't afford that kind of money. My Social Security barely... Mom, we've looked into Medicaid options. You'd have to spend down your assets first, but then the state would help cover costs. Spend down my assets? What assets? I had $347 in my checking account and a 1998 Honda Civic with 200,000 miles that barely ran. My daughter Lacey chimed in from her house in Oakwood. She's 43, processes insurance claims at Guardian Shield, with her supportive voice. Mom, you'll love it there. They have activities, professional medical care, and you won't have to worry about cooking or cleaning or managing bills anymore. Right. Because I'd been managing bills so poorly by working 2 jobs for decades while raising 3 kids alone after their father died in that construction accident. My youngest, Garrison, everyone calls him Gary, he's 40 and sells cars at Premier Motors, added his wisdom. Mom, you're just not safe living alone anymore. What if you fall? What if your blood sugar crashes and nobody's there? 42 years I'd worked nights at Datatech Solutions. 42 years of coming home at 6 a.m. with chemical burns on my hands and exhaustion in my bones so they could have school clothes and birthday presents and college funds I'd emptied for their dreams. 42 years of Miguel's memory keeping me going through the hardest times, never knowing he'd left me the key to a fortune. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly they'd planned my disposal. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. Dayton, Ohio in 1978 was a city built on manufacturing dreams and immigrant determination. That's when I married Miguel Rodriguez, a sweet construction worker who'd come up from Texas with nothing but work boots and big plans. I was 26, he was 28, and we both believed that in America, if you worked hard enough and loved each other enough, everything would work out fine. Miguel was the kind of man who read everything: Popular Mechanics, Scientific American, Business Week, anything he could get his hands at the public library. He said knowledge was the only inheritance his parents couldn't give him, so he was going to give it to himself. While other guys spent their paychecks on beer and weekend fishing trips, Miguel bought books and magazines and filled notebooks with ideas about inventions, investments, and the future. When Trent was born in 1977, we were living in a tiny apartment on Wayne Avenue, and Miguel was pulling down good money with Rodriguez Construction, a small crew he'd started with 2 other guys from the neighborhood. I was working part-time at Sears in the catalog department, and we thought we had the world figured out. That's when Miguel started talking about computers. In 1981, he came home from the library with a copy of Popular Mechanics that had this article about personal computers. He spread it across our kitchen table like it was buried treasure, pointing to pictures of these strange machines that looked like television sets with typewriters attached. "Max, listen to this," he said, reading in that careful way he had when English wasn't his first language. "The personal computer will revolutionize how Americans work, learn, and communicate. Companies like Apple, IBM, and Commodore are positioned to transform every aspect of daily life within the next decade." I looked at that article over his shoulder while bouncing baby Lacey on my hip and trying to keep 2-year-old Trent from coloring on the magazine. "Miguel, those things cost more than our car. Who's going to buy a computer for their house? That's exactly why we should invest now, before everyone else figures it out." Miguel had this way of seeing possibilities that other people missed. While his construction buddies were buying lottery tickets and dreaming about instant wealth, he was reading about companies and technologies and long-term growth. He'd started putting away $5 or $10 a week in what he called his future fund, money for opportunities that might not come again. When we got our tax refund in April 1982, $500 that felt like winning the lottery, Miguel had already made his decision. He'd been following this company called Apple Computer that had just gone public 2 years earlier. The stock was trading at 47 cents per share, and Miguel was convinced they were going to change the world. "Max, I want to buy 1,000 shares, he announced over dinner. "Miguel, that's our whole tax refund. We need that money for Gary's medical bills and the car repair." Gary had been born in February with some respiratory issues that required expensive follow-up care. Our Honda needed a new transmission. The refrigerator was making strange noises that probably meant another repair bill coming. "We need those things now," Miguel said carefully. "But our children are going to need security for their whole lives. This computer company, they're not just selling machines, they're selling the future." I trusted Miguel's instincts more than my own fears. If he believed in something enough to risk our only savings, then I believed in him. On April 23, 1982, Miguel walked into Dayton Securities on Main Street with our tax refund check and bought 1,000 shares of Apple Computer at 0.47 per share. He came home with a stock certificate that looked more official than our marriage license, and he tucked it into an envelope with all our other important papers in the bedroom closet. 20 years from now, Max, this piece of paper is going to take care of our family in ways we can't even imagine. Miguel was right about a lot of things, but he didn't get to see 20 years. The construction accident happened on a Tuesday morning in September 1987. Miguel was working on a high-rise project downtown when the scaffolding collapsed. 3 men fell 30 feet. 2 of them walked away with broken bones. Miguel didn't walk away at all. The funeral costs ate up our small savings account. The medical bills from his 3 days in intensive care wiped out everything else. I was 35 years old with 3 kids. Trent was 10, Lacey was 8, Gary was 7, and absolutely no idea how I was going to survive without Miguel's income. That's when I found the night shift position at Datatech Solutions. The job interview was in a sterile office building on Kuntz Road that smelled like industrial carpet and broken dreams. The manager, Bill Henderson, was a gray-faced man who looked me up and down like he was evaluating a piece of equipment. "Can you work alone? Can you handle industrial cleaning supplies? Can you lift 30-pound garbage bags? Can you keep your mouth shut about confidential business you might see?" I needed that job more than dignity. so I nodded to everything. Pay is $6.50 an hour to start, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. Health insurance kicks in after 6 months if you're still here. Most people don't last 3 weeks. I lasted 42 years. Those early years after Miguel died were the hardest of my life. I'd sleep from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., get the kids from school, help with homework and dinner, get them to bed by 10 p.m., then head out to Data Tech with my cart full of cleaning supplies. The buildings I cleaned were monuments to success I'd never achieve. Corporate headquarters with marble lobbies and executive bathrooms bigger than my living room. But I was building something important, or at least I thought I was. Every dollar I earned went toward making my children's lives better than mine had been. When Trent wanted to play baseball, I picked up weekend shifts to pay for equipment and league fees. When Lacey showed interest in piano lessons, I cleaned extra offices to afford a used keyboard. When Gary needed special tutoring for his learning differences, I worked overtime for months to pay for testing and support. The kids grew up seeing me leave for work after they went to bed and coming home after they left for school. Weekends were for catching up on sleep and squeezing in all the mothering I'd missed during the week. They became self-reliant early, making their own breakfast, walking to school together, helping each other with homework. In the chaos of single motherhood and night shift exhaustion, Miguel's Apple stock certificate got buried deeper and deeper in the bedroom closet. I'd moved it with us when we upgraded to a small house in 1995, filed it away with birth certificates and insurance policies and other papers that seemed important but never urgent. By the time Trent graduated high school in 1995, I was making $8.25 an hour and feeling proud that I'd raised 3 children alone without ever asking for welfare or charity. Trent got a partial scholarship to Wright State University, and I worked double shifts to cover what the scholarship didn't. Lacey followed 2 years later with a scholarship to Cincinnati for dental hygiene school. Gary took longer to find his path, but eventually found steady work in car sales. I kept working, kept cleaning, kept putting my children's needs ahead of my own. When Trent got married in 2003, I paid for the rehearsal dinner. When Lacey went through her divorce in 2010, I helped with legal fees and childcare. When Gary's sales numbers were down, I slipped him money for rent and groceries. By 2015, I was 63 years old, making $10.50 an hour, and starting to feel the physical toll of 4 decades cleaning commercial buildings. My knees ached constantly. My hands were permanently stained from industrial cleaning chemicals. The diabetes diagnosis in 2016 added medical expenses I couldn't afford on top of the exhaustion that never went away. But I kept working because what choice did I have? Social Security wouldn't be enough to live on. I had no retirement savings after decades of helping my children through their crises. The house I'd been renting since 1995 was my only stability, and even that depended on my ability to keep working. The irony that kills me now is that every night for 42 years, I was cleaning buildings owned by successful companies while my own family's fortune sat forgotten in a closet. Every overtime shift I worked to help my children was unnecessary. Every time I chose generic medications over name brand because of cost, every time I bought clothes at Goodwill while my kids wore new outfits, every time I postponed medical care because of expense, all of it was unnecessary. Miguel's prediction had come true in ways that surpassed even his optimistic imagination. Apple Computer hadn't just succeeded, it had revolutionized the world. And those 1,000 shares he'd bought for $470 in 1982 had split and multiplied and grown into a fortune that would have solved every financial struggle we'd ever faced. But in my grief and exhaustion and single-minded focus on my children's immediate needs, I'd completely forgotten about Miguel's gift to our future. The diabetes got worse in 2019. By 2020, my blood sugar was so unstable that I was having episodes at work. Dizzy spells, confusion, near blackouts that made it dangerous for me to handle cleaning chemicals or work alone in empty buildings. DataTech's insurance company started asking questions about liability. Bill Henderson, who'd been my manager for over 2 decades, called me into his office in November 2020. "Max, You've been a hell of an employee for longer than most people work anywhere. But the insurance people are worried about accidents, and honestly, I'm worried about you. Maybe it's time to think about retirement. Retirement on $200 a month. Social Security with medical bills that ate up half of that. Retirement with 3 grown children who'd been trained to see me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be supported. I thought I was facing the end of my independence. I had no idea I was about to discover the beginning of my real power. But first came the moment that changed everything and revealed exactly who my children really were. The first red flag should have been how quickly they had all the nursing home paperwork ready. When I called Trent on December 16, 2020, to tell him Datatech was forcing me into retirement, his response came too fast. No shock, no concern about my health, no questions about my finances, just immediate readiness with a solution that felt rehearsed. Mom, don't worry. Lacey and Gary and I have actually been researching options for when this day came. Sunshine Manor has an excellent reputation, and they specialize in diabetic care. Trent, I just lost my job yesterday. How could you already know about nursing homes? A pause that lasted too long. Mom, we've been concerned about you for a while. You've seemed confused lately, struggling to manage things. Confused? I'd been managing bills, medications, household repairs, and a full-time job while dealing with unstable blood sugar. What exactly had I been confused about? The second red flag was how coordinated their approach became. Within 48 hours, all 3 of my children had called with the same talking points. Lacey, Mom, Sunshine Manor has 24-hour medical monitoring. Gary, Mom, you won't have to worry about cooking or cleaning anymore. Trent, Mom, the social activities will be great for your mental health. It felt like they'd held a family meeting about my future without including me in the discussion. The third red flag was their sudden interest in my paperwork. On December 20th, Trent showed up at my house with a folder and a serious expression. Mom, we need to get your documents organized for the Medicaid application. He started going through my filing cabinet with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly what he was looking for: birth certificate, Social Security card, insurance policies, bank statements. He pulled out files I hadn't touched in years, making neat stacks on my kitchen table. Mom, do you have any investment accounts? Any savings bonds? Anything that might count as assets? Trent, you know I don't have investments. I've been working for wages my whole life. What about Dad's papers? Any old insurance policies or retirement accounts we missed? That's when something cold settled in my stomach. Miguel had been dead for 33 years. Why was Trent asking about his papers now? There might be some old documents in the bedroom closet, but honey, your father didn't have retirement accounts. He was construction. Mom, let me just check. You never know what might turn up. The fourth red flag was how they handled my resistance. When I suggested maybe I could find a smaller apartment instead of a nursing home, their reactions were swift and dismissive. Lacey, Mom, you can barely manage the place you have now. Gary, Mom, you're not thinking clearly about your limitations. Trent, Mom, we're not going to enable you to make unsafe choices. Enable me? To live independently in my own home? When I mentioned maybe getting a part-time job to supplement Social Security, they acted like I'd suggested robbing banks. Mom, no employer is going to hire a 68-year-old diabetic, Lacey said, with the patience you'd use on a confused child. The fifth red flag was their timeline urgency. By January 2021, they were pushing for immediate action. Trent had scheduled a tour of Sunshine Manor without asking me. Lacey had researched Medicaid spend-down requirements and calculated how quickly I could qualify. Gary had found a company to donate my furniture to charity. Mom, there's a waiting list for good facilities, Trent explained. We need to get your application in now if you want a decent room. A decent room. A 10x12 space I'd share with a stranger where I'd live out whatever years I had left eating institutional food and participating in mandatory craft activities. The sixth red flag was what happened when I said no. On January 8, 2021, I gathered my 3 children in my living room and told them I wasn't ready for a nursing home. I wanted to try independent living for a while longer, maybe with some home health assistance if needed. The explosion was immediate and coordinated. Trent: Mom, this is exactly the kind of impaired judgment we've been worried about. Lacey: Mom, you're being selfish. Do you want us to worry about you every single day? Gary: Mom, you're going to fall or have a diabetic emergency, and then what? You'll end up in the hospital, and the state will have to step in anyway. But the 7th red flag was the most chilling. They started talking about me in the 3rd person while I was sitting right there. She's clearly not capable of making rational decisions anymore, Trent said to his siblings. Her diabetes is affecting her cognitive function, Lacey added. We might need to look into guardianship options, Gary suggested. I was sitting 3 feet away from them, fully conscious and capable of hearing every word. But they were discussing my future like I was already gone. That night, after they'd left with promises to think about this more, I couldn't sleep. Something was wrong with this whole situation. My children had gone from normal concern to orchestrated intervention too quickly, with too much preparation, with too much certainty about what was best for me. The 8th red flag came when I started paying attention to their questions. Over the next few weeks, their conversations kept circling back to my assets, my papers, my financial situation. Not out of concern for my welfare, but with the detailed interest of people conducting an inventory. Mom, do you have a will? Trent asked during one visit. Of course I have a will. I made one after your father died. Have you updated it recently? Things change, you know. Tax laws, estate laws. Mom, what about life insurance? Lacey wondered. Do you still have that policy from Dad's work? Mom, if something happened to you, where would we find important documents? Gary inquired. These weren't the questions of children worried about their mother's health and safety. These were the questions of heirs conducting due diligence. The 9th red flag was their reaction when I mentioned getting help from a financial advisor. In late January 2021, I told them I'd been thinking about meeting with someone at Trent's bank to understand my retirement options better. Maybe there were benefits or programs I didn't know about. Trent's face went white. Mom, you don't need a financial advisor. Your situation is pretty straightforward. But Trent, you work at a bank. You know about these things. Maybe there are investments or savings accounts that could help me avoid a nursing home. Mom, trust me. I've already looked into everything. There aren't any magic solutions. The panic in his voice was unmistakable. Why would getting professional financial advice cause that kind of reaction? The final red flag was what I overheard on January 30th, 2021. Lacey had come over to help me organize, and she was on the phone in my kitchen while I was sorting through old papers in the living room. She thought I couldn't hear her, but the diabetes might have affected my feet, not my ears. No, she still doesn't know, Lacey was saying. Trent thinks we can get her placed within the next month if we push the competency angle. What? No, we checked with the lawyer. Once she's declared incompetent, the timeline accelerates. I know. But she's going to find out eventually anyway. Find out what? What was I going to find out? That conversation kept me awake for 3 days. My children were hiding something from me, something significant enough to justify having me declared mentally incompetent to prevent me from discovering it. On February 3rd, 2021, I decided to find out what they were so afraid of me learning. I called Data Tech Solutions and asked to speak to Marcus Williams, the young IT guy who'd always been kind to me during my years cleaning the offices. Marcus was about Gary's age, patient with older people, and had helped me set up email on my ancient computer a few years earlier. Marcus, I need help with something, and I don't know who else to ask. Sure, Mrs. Rodriguez. What's going on? I have some old papers from when my husband died, and my kids keep asking about investments or accounts I might have forgotten about. Is there a way to check online if there are old stocks or bonds registered under my name? Absolutely. There are databases for that kind of thing. Why don't you bring whatever paperwork you have? and I'll help you search. On February 5th, 2021, I drove to Datatech with a manila envelope containing everything I could find from Miguel's papers. Birth certificate, social security information, and buried at the bottom, that old Apple computer stock certificate I'd forgotten about for decades. Marcus took one look at it, and his eyes went wide. "Mrs. Rodriguez, do you know what this is?" "Some old stock my husband bought back in the 1980s. Probably worthless now." Marcus was already typing on his computer, pulling up financial websites and stock tracking tools. His expression kept changing as he entered information and waited for results. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you need to sit down." "Marcus, what is it? Is something wrong?" "Ma'am, this stock certificate is for 1,000 shares of Apple Computer purchased in 1982. Apple has split multiple times since then, and the current value—" He turned his computer screen toward me. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you own stock worth approximately $47.3 million. The room started spinning. $47 million. I was looking at numbers that didn't make sense, at a computer screen showing wealth I couldn't comprehend. "Marcus, that can't be right. Check it again." He checked it 3 more times. Same result. I was a multi-millionaire. I had been a multi-millionaire for years while scrubbing toilets and choosing between medication and groceries. While my children pressured me toward a nursing home I couldn't afford, I was sitting on enough money to buy the entire facility. But there was a worse realization coming. If this information was publicly available online, and if Trent worked in banking with access to financial databases, then— "Marcus, if someone ran a credit check or financial background check on me, would they see this stock?" "Probably, especially if they were looking for assets or doing estate planning research." My children had known. They'd known I was wealthy while watching me struggle with medical bills and housing costs. They'd known I could afford any kind of care I wanted while pushing me toward Medicaid nursing home placement. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to control me until I died, and they could inherit wealth they'd been hiding from me. If you're feeling the fury of this betrayal with me right now, if you're understanding how deep this deception goes, show your support. Hit that like button. Comment if you've ever been manipulated by people who were supposed to protect you, and subscribe to Grandma's legacy, because we need to stick together when family becomes the enemy. But honey, discovering I was rich was just the beginning. Because when you find out your children have been lying about your own wealth while planning your disposal, you don't just get mad, you get strategic. I sat in that Datatech office staring at Marcus Williams' computer screen for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The numbers kept swimming in front of my eyes. $47.3 million. Miguel's $470 investment had grown into more money than I'd earned in my entire lifetime of work. "Marcus, I need you to print this out for me. Everything. All the records, all the calculations." "Of course, Mrs. Rodriguez. But ma'am, you should probably call a financial advisor or lawyer right away. This is serious money." "I will. But first, I need to understand exactly what my children knew and when they knew it." Marcus printed out a dozen pages showing the stock history, the splits, the current value, and the timeline of growth. I folded those papers carefully and put them in my purse next to my diabetes medication and the Sunshine Manor brochures my children had given me. $47 million. While I was rationing insulin and choosing generic medications, I was worth more than most lottery winners. The drive home from Datatech took 20 minutes, but I felt like I aged 20 years. Every memory was shifting, every conversation replaying with new meaning. How long had they known? How many lies had they told me? How many times had they watched me struggle financially while sitting on information that could have changed my entire life? By the time I pulled into my driveway on Riverside Drive, I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was furious. I went straight to my bedroom closet and pulled out every document Miguel had ever filed away: insurance papers, tax returns, business records from his short-lived construction company. And there, in a manila folder labeled Future Plans, in Miguel's careful handwriting, I found something that made my blood run cold. A letter addressed to me, dated September 1987, the week before Miguel died. Mi amor, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I pray you never need to open this folder, but if you do, remember that I always planned for our family's future. The Apple stock certificate is just the beginning. I've been tracking this company since 1980, and I believe they will change the world. Don't let anyone convince you to sell these shares. Don't let anyone tell you they're worthless. In 20 years, this investment will take care of you and our children for the rest of your lives. Trust the future I saw for us. Con amor siempre, Miguel. Miguel had known. He'd planned for exactly this situation. He'd tried to leave me a message about the importance of that stock certificate, and in my grief and exhaustion, I'd never read it. But more importantly, if Trent had been going through my papers for estate planning or Medicaid applications, he would have found this folder. He would have read Miguel's letter. He would have known not just about the current value of the stock, but about Miguel's intention that it remain in our family. I needed to find out exactly what they knew and when they'd known it. The next morning, February 6, 2021, I called Trent at Pinnacle Financial Group. Trent, I've been thinking about what you said about organizing my papers for Medicaid. Maybe you're right. Could you come over this weekend and help me go through everything properly? Of course, Mom. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Reasonable. Like accepting their lies and manipulation was the rational choice. And Trent? You mentioned checking if I had any old investments or savings bonds. Have you already looked into that somehow? Another pause. What do you mean, Mom? I mean, did you run any kind of financial background check or estate planning analysis on me when you were researching nursing home costs? The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Mom, why would you ask that? Because you seem very certain that I have no assets other than Social Security. I'm wondering how you became so sure. Mom, we'll talk about this when I come over on Saturday, okay? He hung up without saying goodbye. That afternoon, I called Lacey at Guardian Shield Insurance. Lacey, honey, when you were researching Medicaid requirements for nursing home care, did you need to verify my financial situation somehow? Mom, what kind of question is that? I'm asking if your insurance company has access to databases that show people's assets. Since you work in claims, you'd know about that kind of thing. Mom, you're acting paranoid. Are you feeling okay? Maybe your blood sugar is affecting your thinking. Every time I asked direct questions, they deflected to my mental competency. That wasn't coincidence. Lacey, I'm feeling fine. I just want to understand how you became so knowledgeable about my finances. Mom, we can discuss this when we all get together. You're worrying me with these strange questions. She hung up too. That evening, Gary stopped by unannounced, something he rarely did unless he needed money or food from my refrigerator. Mom, Trent, and Lacey called me. They said you're asking weird questions about financial background checks. Gary, let me ask you something directly. Do any of you know about investments or assets I might have that I've forgotten about? His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, panic, then forced confusion. Mom, what are you talking about? You don't have investments. You've been working for wages your whole life. So if I told you I discovered some old stock certificates from your father, you'd be surprised? Gary's face went completely white. What kind of stock certificates? You tell me, Gary. What kind of stock certificates should I be looking for? Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. But his body language was screaming that he knew exactly what I was talking about. Gary, sit down. We need to have an honest conversation. Mom, I should go. You're acting really strange, and it's making me uncomfortable. He left so quickly, he forgot the leftover pot roast he'd been eyeing in my refrigerator. That night, I couldn't sleep. 3 conversations, 3 guilty reactions, 3 people who suddenly couldn't handle direct questions about my finances. They knew. All of them knew. On February 8, 2021, I decided to set a trap. I called all 3 of my children and told them I'd found some old papers of their fathers that might be important. I wanted them all to come over that weekend to look at them together. What kind of papers, Mom? Trent asked. Business documents, investment records, things I didn't understand when he died? Maybe they're worth something, maybe not. The panic in his voice was immediate. Mom, you shouldn't get your hopes up. Dad didn't have the kind of money that would leave valuable investments. I know, honey, but I figured you'd want to see them anyway. Saturday afternoon, February 10th, 2021, all three of my children arrived within 10 minutes of each other. They'd clearly coordinated their timing, probably strategized their approach. I had Miguel's papers spread across the kitchen table, but I'd hidden the Apple stock certificate and his letter. I wanted to see what they'd say before I revealed what I knew. Okay, here's what I found, I announced, showing them old tax returns, insurance policies, and business records from Rodriguez Construction. They went through everything with the efficiency of people who'd seen it all before. No surprise, no curiosity, just methodical examination of documents they obviously recognized. Mom, these are just normal business records, Lacey said. Nothing valuable here. Are you sure? What about investment accounts or stock purchases? Trent answered too quickly. Dad wasn't the kind of person who bought stocks, Mom. He was a working man. But what if he had bought stock? Hypothetically, what would we do with old stock certificates? Gary couldn't help himself. Well, you'd have to check if the company still exists, if the stock split, what the current value would be. Lacey kicked him under the table. I mean, hypothetically, Gary backtracked. But like Trent said, Dad wasn't an investor. That's when I pulled out the Apple stock certificate and placed it in the center of the table. The reaction was everything I'd expected and worse than I'd feared. Trent went pale and started stammering. Mom, where did you find that? Lacey burst into tears. Oh God, she knows. Gary just stared at it like it was a bomb that might explode. How long have you known about this? I asked quietly. Trent tried to recover. Mom, we just found out about it when we were helping you organize for Medicaid. Stop lying to me, Trent. How long? The silence stretched until Lacey couldn't stand it anymore. Since 2018. We've known since 2018. 2.5 years. You've known I was wealthy for 2.5 years while watching me struggle to pay for insulin and rent. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Lacey crying and the refrigerator humming. How did you find out? I asked. Trent finally looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something real in his face. Shame. You applied for a reverse mortgage in 2018, remember? You asked me to help with the paperwork because you were having trouble with the payments. I remembered. The house payments had gotten overwhelming, and someone had suggested a reverse mortgage might help. When I ran the financial background check for the mortgage company, the Apple stock showed up. I couldn't believe it. I ran the numbers 3 times. And then what did you do? I called Lacey and Gary. We didn't know what to do. What you should have done was tell me immediately that I was rich. Gary spoke up for the first time. Mom, you have to understand. We were in shock. We didn't know how to process it. So you decided to process it by lying to me for over 2 years? Lacey wiped her eyes. Mom, we were scared. We didn't know what you'd do with that much money. We thought maybe it was better to let things stay the way they were. Better for who? Better for you knowing you'd inherit millions when I died? Or better for me rationing medication and facing homelessness? Trent tried to explain. Mom, we consulted with a financial advisor. They said sudden wealth can be dangerous for elderly people. There are scams, bad investments, family members who might take advantage, like children who hide wealth from their own mother. The confrontation that followed revealed the depth of their betrayal. For 2.5 years, they'd watched me struggle financially while knowing I was worth $47 million. They'd calculated inheritance timelines, consulted lawyers about estate planning, and strategized how to manage my wealth after my death. But the most devastating revelation was still coming. The nursing home, I said slowly. You weren't trying to help me. You were trying to warehouse me until I died so you could inherit the money without me ever knowing about it. Mom, That's not, Trent started. That's exactly what it was. You needed me declared incompetent so I couldn't discover the stock. You needed me in institutional care so I couldn't make decisions about my own money. You were planning to let me die in poverty while sitting on a fortune. Gary finally broke. Mom, we never meant for it to go this far. We got scared when you started talking about financial advisors. We thought if you found out about the stock, you might do something reckless with it. Something reckless? Like living in dignity? Like getting proper medical care? Like having choices about my own future? We were trying to protect the family's wealth, Lacey said through her tears. You were trying to steal the family's wealth. There's a difference. That's when I pulled out Miguel's letter and read it aloud. By the time I finished, all 3 of my children were crying, but I felt nothing but cold fury. Your father planned this inheritance to take care of all of us. Instead, you used it as a reason to betray me. Trent made one last attempt. Mom, we can fix this. We can help you manage the money now, make sure you get the best care. Trent, you had 2.5 years to do the right thing. Every time I couldn't afford medication, every time I worried about rent, every time you suggested a nursing home I couldn't afford, you knew I had the money to solve every problem. You chose to let me suffer. So what happens now? Gary asked. I looked around my kitchen table at these 3 people who shared my DNA but had never shared my values, and I realized something that changed everything. I didn't owe them forgiveness. I didn't owe them understanding. I didn't owe them anything. Now you learn what it feels like to deal with someone who has resources and no longer cares about your feelings. They had no idea what they'd awakened. They thought they were stealing from a broken-down cleaning lady with no options. But they'd actually betrayed a woman with $47 million and absolutely nothing left to lose. The revenge I was planning would be more thorough, more public, and more devastating than anything they could imagine. The Monday morning after confronting my children, I woke up with perfect clarity about exactly what I was going to do. They'd spent 2.5 years planning my disposal while managing my wealth in secret. Now I was going to spend the next year planning their destruction while they remained completely unaware of my intentions. My first call was to Morrison & Associates, the most expensive law firm in Dayton. Mr. Morrison, my name is Maxine Rodriguez, and I need representation for some complex financial and family issues. I should mention up front that I have liquid assets of approximately $47 million. Suddenly, Jonathan Morrison had time for a same-day appointment. Within a week, I had a team of attorneys, financial advisors, and private investigators working on what we called Project Segundo Chance, my plan to turn the tables on children who'd tried to control my life through deception. My second call was to Marcus Williams at DataTech. Marcus, you helped me discover that stock information, and I'd like to offer you a job. I'm starting a company, and I need someone with technology skills who understands loyalty and discretion. Marcus became my first employee at Segundo Chance Enterprises, officially incorporated on February 18, 2021, with me as CEO and primary shareholder. But my real strategy wasn't just about building a business. It was about buying my children's employers and systematically destroying their careers from the inside. The research phase took 6 weeks. My private investigators, led by a former FBI agent named Patricia Chen, compiled detailed reports on Pinnacle Financial Group, Guardian Shield Insurance, and Premier Motors. Financial health, corporate structure, employee satisfaction, management weaknesses, everything I'd need to orchestrate 3 hostile takeovers without raising suspicion. Pinnacle Financial Group was the easiest target. They'd been struggling since the 2020 pandemic, hemorrhaging customers and desperately seeking capital investment. Their stock was undervalued, and several major shareholders were looking to sell. Guardian Shield Insurance was having regulatory problems. Recent claims processing scandals had damaged their reputation, and they were facing expensive litigation that was draining their reserves. Premier Motors was the most vulnerable. The owner, Frank Kowalski, was 67 years old and had been trying to sell for 2 years without finding buyers willing to pay his asking price. By March 15, 2021, I was ready to begin the acquisitions. Pinnacle Financial Group fell first. Working through Morrison & Associates and a series of shell corporations, we began purchasing shares quietly through different brokers. Within 6 weeks, Segundo Chance Enterprises owned 51% of Pinnacle Financial, enough for a controlling interest. The beauty of the plan was that Trent had no idea his mother was now technically his boss. The takeover was structured as a private equity acquisition led by Segundo Chance Capital Management, with my involvement completely hidden behind layers of corporate entities. On April 30, 2021, the new management team arrived at Pinnacle Financial to announce restructuring and efficiency improvements. Trent attended the mandatory staff meeting where they explained that roughly 40% of current employees would be terminated over the next 6 months based on performance metrics and redundancy analysis. I watched the whole presentation via live stream from my new office in a downtown Dayton high-rise that Segundo Chance had purchased for headquarters. Seeing Trent's worried face as he learned his job was in jeopardy gave me more satisfaction than any of Miguel's stock gains ever had. Guardian Shield Insurance required a different approach. Instead of buying them out, I hired the best class action lawyers in Ohio to represent clients who'd been denied claims due to Guardian Shield's faulty processing systems. The litigation costs, combined with regulatory fines, weakened them enough that they were desperate for emergency capital investment. Segundo Chance offered to rescue Guardian Shield with a $9.8 million cash infusion in exchange for controlling ownership. The deal closed on June 15, 2021. Again, Lacey had no idea that her mother now owned the company that employed her. But she definitely noticed when the new management instituted productivity improvements that included mandatory overtime, reduced break periods, and performance standards that seemed designed to eliminate experienced employees. Premier Motors was the most personal acquisition because Gary had always been my baby, the one I'd worried about most, helped the most, forgiven the most. His betrayal had cut deepest because I'd given him everything and received nothing but lies in return. Frank Kowalski was thrilled to finally find a buyer willing to pay his $4.1 million asking price. The sale closed on July 8, 2021, and Gary learned about the ownership change when he showed up for work on Monday morning to find new management and a completely restructured compensation plan. Instead of salary plus commission, all sales staff would now work purely on commission with higher sales targets. Instead of the casual, family-friendly atmosphere Gary was used to, there were new rules about punctuality, appearance standards, and customer service protocols. Gary, who'd never been particularly motivated or disciplined, struggled immediately with the new expectations. But the most beautiful part of my plan was still to come. On August 1, 2021, I launched my social media campaign. Working with a digital marketing agency, I created TikTok account or Maxima Revenge and Instagram Autech Grandma Justice. My first video was simple. A 68-year-old woman sitting in an elegant office explaining how she'd discovered her children had been hiding her $47 million inheritance while trying to put her in a nursing home. The video got 2.3 million views in 48 hours. Comments poured in from adult children, elderly parents, and people dealing with family financial abuse. The story resonated because it touched on fears that many families face. What happens when money corrupts relationships? How do you handle children who see elderly parents as assets to be managed rather than people to be loved? But I wasn't just telling my story for sympathy. I was building an audience for the justice that was coming. Video 2 revealed that I'd bought controlling interests in all 3 companies where my children worked. The comment section exploded with people cheering for Grandma's revenge and sharing their own stories of family betrayal. Video 3 showed the employment struggles my children were now facing. Trent's performance reviews at the restructured Pinnacle Financial. Lacey's difficulties meeting new productivity standards at Guardian Shield. Gary's failing sales numbers at the transformed Premier Motors. The audience was hooked. Each video got millions of views, thousands of comments, and endless shares from people who were living vicariously through my calculated revenge. But the viral fame created an unexpected problem. My children figured out what was happening. The confrontation came on August 15th, 2021. All three of them showed up at my Segundo Chance headquarters, a building they'd never seen, in a life they'd never imagined I could have. Security brought them to my executive office on the 20th floor. They looked small and defeated, sitting across from my mahogany desk while I sat in a leather chair that cost more than they'd made in months. "Mom, we know what you're doing," Trent said without preamble. "What am I doing, Trent?" "You bought our companies. You're sabotaging our careers." "I'm running legitimate businesses and making sound management decisions. If your careers are suffering, maybe you should examine your own performance." Lacey was crying again. "Mom, this is cruel. We have families to support, mortgages to pay." "Lacey, I had medical bills to pay and rent I couldn't afford while you hid my wealth from me. Did you consider that cruel?" Gary tried a different approach. "Mom, we get it. We made mistakes. We should have told you about the stock. But this revenge thing isn't healthy. It's not what Dad would have wanted. Don't you dare tell me what your father would have wanted. Miguel left that stock to take care of all of us. You tried to steal it from me. Now you're facing the consequences." Trent leaned forward. "So what do you want? An apology? We're sorry. We made bad choices. Can we move on from this?" I looked at my three children, middle-aged adults who still thought they could manipulate me with words while offering nothing of substance, and I realized how little they understood about accountability. "Trent, you're sorry you got caught. You're sorry I discovered the stock. You're sorry your plan to warehouse me in a nursing home failed. But you're not sorry about the cruelty. You're not sorry about the lying. You're not sorry about the betrayal. Mom, we are sorry. We know we hurt you. If you were truly sorry, you would have told me about the stock in 2018 when you discovered it. You would have supported my independence instead of pushing institutional care. You would have celebrated my wealth instead of trying to hide it from me." "So what happens now?" Gary asked. "Now you learn what I learned working night shift for 42 years, that surviving requires hard work, personal responsibility, and the ability to earn what you receive instead of expecting what you haven't worked for." "Are you firing us?" Lacey asked. "I'm not firing you. I'm giving you the same opportunities you thought I deserved. You can work hard and prove your value, or you can fail based on your own choices. The difference is that now your performance will be judged by the same standards you applied to me." They left that meeting understanding that their comfortable assumptions about employment security had evaporated. They were now working for companies controlled by a woman they'd betrayed, under management teams focused on performance and accountability. But I wasn't finished yet. The public humiliation phase was just beginning, and it was going to be more thorough than any of them imagined. The employment struggles hit my children exactly as I'd planned, but their reactions revealed character flaws that went deeper than I'd imagined. By September 2021, Trent was the first to crack under the new performance standards at Pinnacle Financial. The restructured company required documentation for every client interaction, measurable results for all sales activities, and accountability for loan processing timelines that had previously been loose suggestions. Trent, who'd coasted for years on relationship banking and minimal oversight, couldn't adapt. His client retention numbers dropped. His loan processing efficiency ranked in the bottom 10% of all employees. His attendance became sporadic as he struggled with what he called workplace stress. The new management team at Pinnacle, who had no idea they were implementing policies designed by the mother of one of their employees, documented everything. Poor performance reviews, missed deadlines, client complaints about incomplete service. On September 28, 2021, Trent was placed on a 90-day improvement plan. I watched the meeting via security cameras I'd had installed throughout all three companies. "Mr. Rodriguez," the branch manager explained, "your performance metrics indicate significant deficiencies in client service, loan processing accuracy, and sales goal achievement. This improvement plan outlines specific benchmarks you'll need to meet to retain your position. Trent tried his usual approach. "I've been with this company for 8 years. I know our clients personally. These new metrics don't account for relationship building and customer loyalty. Mr. Rodriguez, customer loyalty should translate into measurable results. Your client retention rate is 67%, which is 23 points below company standards." What Trent didn't know was that I'd designed those standards specifically to highlight his weaknesses. After years of watching him coast on charm and connections while producing minimal actual value, I wanted to see if he could perform when mediocrity was no longer acceptable. He couldn't. Lacey's struggles at Guardian Shield took a different form. The insurance industry requires attention to detail, regulatory compliance, and processing efficiency that Lacey had never been forced to demonstrate. Under previous management, she'd been able to handle routine claims with minimal oversight and little accountability for processing speed or accuracy. The new Guardian Shield management implemented productivity tracking software that monitored every aspect of claims processing: time per file, accuracy rates, regulatory compliance scores, customer satisfaction ratings. Lacey's numbers were devastating. She was processing 23% fewer claims than company averages, with accuracy rates 31% below standards. Customer complaints about delayed processing and poor communication had spiked in her department. By October 2021, Lacey was working mandatory overtime to meet minimum quotas, staying until 7 p.m. most nights to complete work that more efficient processors finished by 4 p.m. Her stress levels affected her family life, her health, and her ability to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lacey was now working the same exhausting hours I'd worked for decades, except she was doing it to meet performance standards instead of supporting her family's survival. Gary's situation at Premier Motors was the most pathetic because it revealed how little he'd learned from watching my work ethic his entire life. Car sales is a results-driven profession that rewards effort, persistence, and customer service skills. The previous owner had allowed Gary to drift along with minimal sales numbers because the dealership was small and competition was limited. Under new management, Premier Motors became aggressively competitive. Sales quotas doubled. Customer service standards were enforced with mystery shopper programs. Marketing initiatives required active participation and measurable results. Gary, who'd never been motivated by anything more challenging than showing up on time, was completely overwhelmed. His monthly sales dropped from 8 cars, already below industry averages, to 3 cars. His customer satisfaction scores ranked dead last among the sales team. His attendance became erratic as he called in sick whenever he felt too stressed to work. The other sales representatives, hungrier, more disciplined, better trained, started taking over his leads and his customers. By November 2021, Gary was earning less in commission than some part-time employees made in hourly wages. But what made their professional struggles even more satisfying was how they handled the stress. Instead of rising to meet higher standards, all 3 of them began looking for ways to blame their problems on external factors. Trent complained that the new Pinnacle management was targeting him unfairly. Lacey claimed the Guardian Shield productivity software was designed to set employees up for failure. Gary insisted that the Premier Motors sales quotas were impossible to meet in the current economic climate. None of them considered the possibility that they might need to work harder, develop better skills, or take personal responsibility for their performance. Meanwhile, my social media following was exploding with people fascinated by the real-time corporate revenge story unfolding across multiple platforms. By December 2021, a Maxima Revenge had 3.2 million TikTok followers, and OTech Grandma Justice had 1.8 million Instagram followers. My videos documenting each stage of my children's professional decline were getting millions of views and thousands of supportive comments. The audience engagement was incredible. People shared their own stories of family betrayal, adult children who'd taken advantage of elderly parents, and workplace situations where accountability finally caught up with underperforming employees. But the viral fame also attracted negative attention. Local news outlets picked up the story in January 2022. Dayton grandmother uses $47 million inheritance to buy children's employers, became a regional sensation, then a national story when it was picked up by CNN and Fox Business. The media coverage was mixed. Some outlets portrayed me as a vindictive woman using wealth to punish family members. Others framed it as a cautionary tale about elder abuse and the importance of family financial honesty. The publicity forced my children into an impossible situation. They couldn't deny their behavior because I had documentation of everything. They couldn't claim to be victims because their betrayal was too well documented. They couldn't seek public sympathy because the overwhelming audience response supported my actions. Instead, they tried to turn the family against me. In February 2022, my sister Carmen called from Phoenix, where she'd retired after working as a school administrator for 30 years. "Max, I've been seeing the news stories about you and the kids. People are talking about this situation like it's entertainment, but these are your children. This is your family." "Carmen, these are the children who tried to put me in a nursing home while hiding my wealth from me. They stopped being my family when they chose money over love. Max, I understand you're hurt, but destroying their careers isn't going to fix the relationship. I'm not trying to fix the relationship. I'm teaching them that actions have consequences." Carmen tried the guilt approach. "What would Miguel think about this? Would he want you using his investment to hurt his children?" "Miguel's investment was supposed to take care of all of us. They tried to steal it. Now they're learning what it feels like to struggle financially while someone else controls their security." But the family pressure campaign revealed something important. Even people who should have supported me were more comfortable with my accepting abuse than with my fighting back against it. My brother Carlos called from San Antonio. "Max, you're embarrassing the whole family with this social media thing. People are laughing at us." "Carlos, people are laughing at children who tried to steal from their elderly mother. If you're embarrassed by that, maybe examine why you're taking their side instead of mine." "I'm not taking sides. I'm trying to preserve family unity." There was no family unity when they were planning my disposal. Where was your concern about family unity then? Even some of my longtime friends were uncomfortable with my approach. Maria Santos, who'd worked alongside me at Datatech for 15 years, called in March 2022. "Max, I'm happy you're wealthy now, but this revenge thing is getting out of hand. Maybe it's time to forgive and move on." "Maria, forgiveness has to be earned. They haven't even acknowledged the full extent of their betrayal, let alone shown genuine remorse." "But Max, they're still your children." "Children who spend 2.5 years plotting their mother's institutionalization while hiding her wealth aren't children. They're predators who happen to share my DNA." The most revealing responses came from my children themselves. Instead of accepting responsibility and working to rebuild trust, they doubled down on victimhood. Trent started telling people I was mentally unstable and that my wealth had triggered some kind of psychological break. Lacey claimed I was punishing the whole family for their honest mistakes. Gary insisted that I was destroying innocent grandchildren's futures to satisfy my need for revenge. None of them seemed to understand that if they'd simply told me about the Apple stock in 2018, we could have been celebrating together instead of fighting publicly. By spring 2022, the employment situation had reached its inevitable conclusion. Trent was terminated from Pinnacle Financial on April 15, 2022, for failing to meet improvement plan benchmarks. His severance package was minimal, and his reputation in Dayton banking circles was destroyed. Lacey was forced to resign from Guardian Shield on May 3, 2022, after a customer complaint investigation revealed multiple violations of claims processing protocols. Her insurance industry credentials were suspended pending further review. Gary quit Premier Motors on May 20, 2022, claiming the work environment had become hostile and impossible. His final month's commission check was $127. All three of my children were now unemployed, facing financial difficulties, and dealing with professional reputations that would make finding equivalent positions nearly impossible in Dayton. But the public consequences were just the beginning. The private reckoning was going to be even more thorough, because I was about to offer them something they didn't expect, a path to redemption that would test whether they were capable of real change. By June 2022, I had everything I'd wanted from the revenge phase. My children were unemployed, financially struggling, and publicly exposed for their betrayal. But something unexpected was happening to me during this process. I was discovering who I actually was when I wasn't exhausted, desperate, or manipulated. For the first time in my adult life, I had unlimited resources and complete control over my decisions. I could live anywhere, buy anything, travel everywhere. But what I really wanted was something money couldn't purchase directly, the satisfaction of building something meaningful with Miguel's legacy. That's when Segundo Chance Enterprises evolved from a vehicle for revenge into something much more significant. Working with Marcus Williams and a team of business consultants, I started researching the employment challenges faced by older adults who'd been displaced from their careers. Age discrimination, technology gaps, financial exploitation, the same issues that had made me vulnerable to my children's manipulation. In July 2022, I announced the expansion of Segundo Chance Enterprises into what I called Third Chapter Employment Services. Instead of just owning the companies where my children had worked, we were going to transform them into models for employing older adults who deserved second chances at meaningful careers. Pinnacle Financial became the first pilot program. Instead of traditional banking focused on young, aggressive sales staff, we created a customer service model built around experienced financial counselors who understood long-term relationships and conservative financial planning. We hired 12 employees over age 55, including several women who'd been forced into early retirement when their previous employers restructured. The results were remarkable. Customer satisfaction scores increased 34%, client retention improved by 28%, and loan default rates dropped to the lowest in the company's history. Guardian Shield transformed into a boutique insurance agency specializing in coverage for older adults and retirees. Our claims processors, all over age 50, understood the unique challenges of navigating medical insurance, long-term care policies, and estate planning in ways that younger employees simply couldn't match. Premier Motors became Premier Second Chance Auto, focusing on reliable, affordable vehicles for customers who'd been ignored by traditional dealerships. Our sales staff, experienced professionals who'd been pushed out of other careers, connected with customers who needed transportation solutions rather than high-pressure sales tactics. But the most meaningful transformation was what happened to my relationship with my community. The viral fame from Ama Maxima Revenge had made me a local celebrity, but not always in positive ways. Some people saw me as an inspiration, a woman who'd fought back against family abuse and won. Others viewed me as vindictive, using wealth to destroy relationships instead of healing them. I decided to address the criticism directly. In August 2022, I hosted a town hall meeting at the Dayton Convention Center, broadcast live on social media. The topic, When Family Becomes the Enemy, Elder Abuse and Financial Exploitation. The audience included social workers, attorneys, adult children dealing with aging parents, elderly people facing family pressure, and community members curious about the woman who'd become known as Tech Grandma. I started with a simple question. How many people in this room have heard someone say that elderly parents become difficult when they resist their children's suggestions about their living situations, finances, or medical care? Nearly half the audience raised their hands. How many have heard that resistance to family help is a sign of cognitive decline or stubbornness that needs to be managed? Even more hands went up. What if I told you that sometimes that resistance is actually the last line of defense against people who see elderly parents as problems to be solved rather than individuals deserving respect? That question opened a conversation that lasted 3 hours. Adult children shared stories of parents who'd become paranoid about financial decisions, not understanding that their parents had good reason to be suspicious of family members pressuring them to sign documents or transfer assets. Elderly audience members talked about the impossible position of needing help while maintaining independence, wanting family involvement while protecting themselves from exploitation. Social workers described cases where well-meaning children had systematically taken control of parents' lives, convinced they were providing care while actually creating dependence and isolation. The town hall became a monthly series with follow-up sessions focusing on legal protections, family communication strategies, and community resources for older adults facing family pressure. But my most important work was still ahead of me, deciding what to do about my own children. By September 2022, Trent, Lacey, and Gary had been unemployed for several months. They were facing mortgage difficulties, credit problems, and social embarrassment from the ongoing media attention about our family conflict. Trent had moved into a studio apartment after losing his house. Lacey was working part-time retail jobs that barely covered her expenses. Gary was living with a friend and selling used items online to pay for groceries. They'd hit rock bottom financially, the same place they'd been willing to let me stay while hiding my wealth. That's when I decided to offer them something they probably didn't expect, an opportunity to earn their way back into my life. On October 1st, 2022, I sent each of them identical letters. You've now experienced what it feels like to struggle financially while someone else controls resources that could help you. You've learned what it's like to have your security depend on other people's decisions about your value and worthiness. I'm offering you a choice. You can continue struggling independently, building new careers and lives without any assistance from me. Or you can accept employment with Segundo Chance Enterprises under the following conditions. You'll work entry-level positions earning $15 per hour, more than I made cleaning offices, but less than you've been accustomed to earning. You'll work full-time hours with the same expectations of punctuality, performance, and professionalism that any employer would require. You'll attend family therapy sessions to address the issues that led to your betrayal. And you'll publicly acknowledge the harm you caused through a video statement that will be posted on my social media accounts. If you complete 1 year of satisfactory employment and therapy, we can discuss rebuilding our relationship. If you complete 2 years, we can discuss your potential advancement within the company. But understand, this is not forgiveness. This is an opportunity to earn something you lost through your own choices. You have 30 days to decide. After that, this offer expires permanently. Ems Rodriguez, CEO, Segundo Chance Enterprises. Their responses revealed everything I needed to know about whether real change was possible. Trent's reply came within a week. Mom, I appreciate the offer, but $15 an hour is insulting for someone with my experience and education. I'm exploring opportunities with other financial institutions that recognize my value. Trent was still living in delusion about his market value and personal worth. The banking industry in Dayton knew about his termination and the circumstances surrounding it. No reputable financial institution was going to hire someone whose professional destruction had been documented in national media. Lacey's response took longer. Mom, I understand why you're angry, but public humiliation isn't something I can accept. I'm willing to do the work and therapy, but making a video apologizing for our family business feels like cruel and unusual punishment. Lacey wanted the benefits of reconciliation without the accountability that would make it meaningful. She still didn't understand that private apologies were worthless after public betrayal. Gary surprised me by accepting the terms immediately. Mom, I'll take the job. I'll do the therapy. I'll make the video. I know I screwed up, and I want to try to fix things between us. On November 1st, 2022, Gary started working in the customer service department at Segundo Chance Financial. $15 an hour, entry-level responsibilities, strict supervision, and weekly therapy appointments with Dr. Patricia Chang, a family counselor who specialized in trust reconstruction. Watching Gary adapt to being an actual employee, showing up on time, following procedures, treating customers with respect, was like watching a 40-year-old man learn basic life skills for the first time. The therapy sessions revealed the depth of entitlement and self-centeredness that had made his betrayal possible. Gary had genuinely believed that my wealth belonged to him eventually, so hiding it from me was just protecting family assets. He'd convinced himself that my nursing home placement would be safer and easier for everyone, not understanding that he'd been prioritizing his convenience over my autonomy. But slowly, painfully, Gary began to understand what he'd actually done. The weekly sessions with Dr. Chang forced him to confront the cruelty of his choices, the selfishness of his motivations, and the damage he'd caused to someone who'd sacrificed everything for his benefit. In December 2022, Gary recorded his public apology video. It was raw, honest, and humiliating, exactly what genuine accountability should look like. My name is Gary Rodriguez, and I want to apologize publicly to my mother, Maxine Rodriguez, for the worst betrayal imaginable. In 2018, we discovered that Mom was worth over $47 million from Apple stock our father had bought decades earlier. Instead of telling her immediately, my brother, sister, and I decided to hide this information while she struggled financially, and we planned her placement in a nursing home she couldn't afford. We stole 2.5 years of financial security from our own mother while she chose between medication and groceries. We tried to have her declared mentally incompetent to prevent her from discovering wealth that rightfully belonged to her. We are the worst kind of children, and she had every right to destroy our careers and expose our behavior. I'm working now to earn forgiveness I don't deserve, and I hope other adult children see our story as a warning about what greed and selfishness can cost you. The video got 4 million views and 47,000 comments, mostly supportive of Gary's honesty and my decision to require public accountability. Trent and Lacey, meanwhile, continued to struggle with unemployment and mounting financial pressures while maintaining that my expectations were unreasonable and vindictive. By the end of 2022, I had built something I'd never imagined possible: a successful business empire, a meaningful community presence, and a relationship with one of my children that was based on genuine respect instead of manipulation. Gary was earning his way back into my life through daily demonstrations of character change. Trent and Lacey were learning that pride and entitlement don't pay bills or build relationships. And I was finally living the life Miguel had envisioned when he bought those Apple shares 40 years ago, not just wealthy, but purposeful, respected, and surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide them. Today is December 15th, 2023, and I'm sitting here in my executive office at Segundo Chance Enterprises, looking out at downtown Dayton and reflecting on the most transformative 3 years of my life. Gary just knocked on my door to tell me about a customer whose car loan application he'd helped approve. A 67-year-old woman who needed reliable transportation to visit her grandchildren. The pride in his voice reminded me why second chances can be worth the investment when people are genuinely committed to earning them. This week marks exactly 3 years since I discovered that Apple stock certificate and learned my children had been hiding my wealth while planning my disposal. 3 years since I thought I was a broken-down cleaning lady facing homelessness, only to discover I was a multimillionaire with the power to rewrite every assumption about my life and theirs. Segundo Chance Enterprises now operates 7 businesses across Ohio, employing 312 people over age 50 who deserve meaningful work instead of forced retirement. Our success rate is remarkable: 94% employee retention, customer satisfaction scores 40% above industry averages, and profit margins that prove experience and wisdom create value that youth and aggression cannot match. Gary completed his 2nd year of employment and therapy last month. The transformation has been genuine and profound, from an entitled 40-year-old man-child who lived off his elderly mother while planning her institutionalization, to a responsible adult who earns respect through daily demonstrations of character. He's been promoted to customer service supervisor, makes $22 an hour, and has his own apartment for the first time in years. More importantly, he's learned the difference between being given things and earning them. Trent and Lacey never accepted my offer. They remain unemployed, struggling financially, and convinced that I'm the problem rather than their behavior. Trent moved to Columbus in early 2023, working part-time at a check cashing place for $12 an hour. Lacey works at a call center in Cincinnati, making $16 an hour processing customer service complaints. My social media following has grown to 4.8 million people across all platforms. Maxima Revenge has become a community where older adults share stories of family financial abuse and find support for standing up to manipulation regardless of their age. If this story of corporate revenge and family justice has touched your heart, like this video right now, tell me in the comments what you learned about standing up for yourself no matter how old you are, and subscribe to Grandma's Legacy, because every grandmother deserves to have her voice heard and her wisdom respected. The children who tried to put me in a nursing home while hiding my millions learned that the cleaning lady they underestimated was actually a tech CEO with unlimited resources and absolutely nothing left to lose. They thought they were managing a confused elderly woman. They discovered they were betraying a sharp-minded businesswoman who could rewrite the rules, rebuild from betrayal, and prove that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage you can have. And that, honey, is exactly what happened here.